Yep, it's time. Let's get started. It's another Selway's Techno Saturdays. How's it going, everyone? I'm this guy, and I don't know. It's fun today. I'm extra anxious and excited because it's like walking on a tightrope. In addition to streaming, we've got something a little more complicated going on at the same time, but I think something rewarding to learn how to do and to get going with. So, right. You probably saw that, from the title of the show today, we're using a platform to go online and synchronize and play music together with others over the internet, which is a big deal right now, right? Because a lot of us stuck inside, assuming we're being responsible, right? We're at home, we're not going out and going to events and performing live, but we still, as musicians, we want to collaborate, we want to perform together, and this is one way to do it. Now, this isn't a new thing. It's been around for years, actually, but there's, of course, a lot more interest in this now. There's a lot of new platforms coming out and being developed for a real-time performance or collaboration for music. And what we're looking at today is something called Ninjam, and it's basically a server that's running a clock, and you connect to it using a compatible client, and then you're able to synchronize. If you're just singing or playing an instrument, you can just follow the metronome, or like what we're going to do today, we're going to get our DAWs at the same BPM and synced, kind of like a DJ beat matches, and get going with the clock on the server. And then once we're synced up there, others can join. And I've got a friend, one of our 343 guys here at Sultane, helping out with that today. And so he and I are going to get set up. We're not going to do a live show for you, really. We're just going to kind of go through the process of how to, what software we're using. Talk a little bit about the installation process. But I've already done it, so we'll just talk about it. And then, show you the different things that you can do, and then a little bit of the workflow of how to get started using it. I'm using Ableton Live, so how to get started using it in your DAW. But it'll be similar depending on what software you might be using. So I don't know. Let's bring Sultane in. How's it going? He's checking his phone. Are you doing social media and stuff?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, John.
Sure. We've been fooling around with this for a couple of days now, and it's been fun just hanging out and getting our beats synced up and playing and jamming for a little bit. So welcome. Thanks for hanging out and doing this with me today.
Sure.
Let's say hello to the chat. Let's see who's here. Enigmatic Onion is a regular. Yes, let's go. That's what we're going to do. And Martin Crockett's welcome. He is hyped for this session. I'm more than hyped. I'm like physically anxious that this is going to work. And hello.
It's difficult.
Yeah, it is a little tricky to get set up at first. It takes some practice, but once you get it, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
To Seth, welcome. And Lie Society, welcome. So before we dive in, I should do the 343 song and dance. 343 Labs is a school, music production school. We do classes in New York and Berlin. We have online courses. I do synthesis and sound design courses and Ableton Live as well. And we have a lot of different types of classes and courses that we're offering. So if you're interested in that, definitely look at the links down here in the description and check us out. We do 343 TV, obviously, what I'm doing right now, every day right about 1 o'clock, different shows about different subjects. Today is Techno Day. And okay, the technology that we're using here doesn't apply only to techno. So, this should be interesting, hopefully, for anyone out there who wants to be able to sync their clock and play music together with other people. And we'll talk about, the issues of latency and things like that. Anyway, we have usually 343 TV, we do giveaways every now and then. We have this week an Arturia effects bundle that we're giving away. You can still join. There should be a link in the chat for you to sign up. And we will, you've got a little bit of time before we announce this week's winner at the end of the show. Also, I want to inform everyone of our Discord server that we've set up recently. We're really, wanting to reach out and grow our community. And, we welcome you to come and check out what we're doing there, get feedback on your tracks, discuss music production and other related topics with like-minded people, and check out what we're doing in terms of classes and special events and performances and things like that. Discord is sort of our center for that now. And I think we can get into this a little bit. Now, I want to talk a little bit about sort of some background here. In terms of techno, like I said, this technology, this Ninjam application and some associated software that works with Ninjam has been around for some years now. And largely it's been kind of populated by instrumental musicians, people playing rock music or other kind of band-oriented music, like a guitarist or drummer or a bassist or a keyboard player, horn players coming together and jamming, right? That's been kind of the thing. And there weren't a lot of people doing strictly electronic music or techno, but recently, over the course of this pandemic, Speedy J, he's a pretty famous techno producer. His real name is Jochen Pop. He does something called Store Lab. And he had been doing streams and, collaborations and, doing these live techno performances for a while before, these times. But recently he's been doing on the internet network synced techno jams. So he would be he's in the Netherlands. Recently, let's say he did a performance recently with Luke Slater, another kind of legendary techno producer from the UK, and they were able to be each in their own studios in different countries, synchronizing their clocks, whether it's their DAW or their external hardware, and able to jam together in real time and then stream this all and perform in real time over the internet, which is amazing. And everyone wanted to know how to do it. If you watch, read the comments on the live streams, and there's a Store Lab Discord. There's people, all the fans are on the Discord. Everybody wants to know what's this crazy technology he's doing. And he was a bit cagey about it at first. They weren't totally open about how they were doing it. But I kind of had a suspicion I knew because I've encountered this stuff before. And then recently they've been a little more open about it and talking about their setup. And now more people are getting into it, right? So I figured now I was really interested, and I figured now was a really good time to do a little presentation and kind of go through the process and let more people know about it. So let's share my screen a little bit here. This is the plugin we're going to be using today. This is Jamtaba. This is a Ninjam client. This is the software, there's other ways to do it, but this is one of the ways that you can connect to a Ninjam server. It works standalone, so you can use this without a DAW. I've had sort of mixed, in terms of doing this with techno and syncing beats, I've had sort of mixed results with that. I still need to do it more, but I've had the best results using the plugin version. There's an audio unit for OS X, and there's also a VST, which Sutton is using for Windows. And so this client allows you to connect to the Ninjam server, right? Before we do that, though, let's take a look and see what else we got going on here. See, this is a DAW called Reaper. Not a very well-known DAW. A very powerful one, inexpensive, can do a lot of good stuff. I believe Speedy J is using Reaper as his kind of main software, and Reaper has this client, this Ninjam client function built in. It's a little bit more slick and integrated into the interface of the DAW. And I did try this out. It works really well. And generally, the process is very similar to what we're going to do with the plugin version with Jamtaba inside of Ableton Live. What else have we got going on? All right. So a couple other elements to this. I'll just quickly show you. This is the website for Jamtaba. It's open source. It's developed by, I think, like one guy. And gives you some information here on the website. There's the download. You can see there's Windows, OS X, and Linux versions. I want to mention this. I'm not going to go through it today. Some of you using OS X, when you try to install this on a modern version of OS X, you will hit these security warnings. It can be a little bit tricky to get it installed. Just I want to let you guys know that ahead of time a little bit, that when you try Jamtaba on OS X for the first time and you're using Catalina or Big Sur, I think is the new one, right? You're going to need to make sure you're paying attention to your security settings and you kind of have to make OS X open it. It doesn't want to because the developer's not signed. But you can trust the software. It's safe. It's not going to do anything crazy to your OS. Just be aware before you install this that the first time you do it, you're going to need to figure out some things in terms of the security settings. But that's for another time. That's not for today's stream. We want to get into the creative use of this. All right, so that's where you find Jamtaba, jamtaba.com. The company that develops Reaper and develops the Ninjam server software is Kokos, right? And this gives you all the information about what it does, how it works. You can run the server independently on a machine and do your own private server. If you're a super nerd and you have access to setting up applications on remote servers, you can run this on a server in the cloud. And there are actually, speaking of, there are a lot of public servers available. And this is what generally people do. Globally, people will connect to Ninjam servers and just see who else is out there playing, right? And it's actually kind of fun to go and listen and see what people are playing. And we might do that for a little bit before we get started on the techno thing. Now, literally, like Friday, I learned about a new service that this is going to be really helpful for a lot of you. A new service from Koord is providing free virtual servers for both Ninjam, and then there's another very popular collaboration real-time jamming application called Jamulus. So you can create a Jamulus server or you can create a Ninjam server. And Jamulus is another kind of technology, and we'll talk about the difference there. But today we're going to be, I'm going to set up right now. I should get this going so we're ready. My own private Ninjam server that I can connect to, and then I can invite others to connect to. So I've already got an account set up here. I'm going to click down here on Global Interval Session and Create Session. It's going to take a minute, but basically, I think I might need to restart this web page. Let's go to New York. Actually, I don't need to choose a location because Ninjam is not location sensitive. It's doing something different. If we wanted a more fast, real-time playing instruments with each other kind of thing, we would probably go for this Jamulus platform. But because we want to sync to a clock, that's the whole point of doing a Ninjam and using the Jamtaba plugin inside of Ableton Live. So I'm going to click down here on Global Interval Session and choose Create Session. And now I've just sent a command to them to set up a virtual server to run the Ninjam server for us that we can connect to. And once that's ready, it's going to give us a public IP address that I can copy into my client inside of Live. So while we're waiting for that, that's going to get started. I'm going to go back over to Ableton Live. Now, again, this is the Jamtaba audio unit version, and it pretty much it's got the same layout as the standalone. And this is what you're going to look at when you first load it up. I've got it up on my master. Basically, you're going to put this plugin on whatever track you want to be audible over the server. So if you could have a bunch of stuff in your session, and if you only want, say, the drums to go and then other instruments to be separate, you would put this just on the drums. In this case, I want everything I'm playing to go out into to the Ninjam server. So I've got it on my master. All right, and you can see here on the left, you've got sort of a track level. There's a meter there and a big green transmit button. When that's green, once you've connected to the server, that means that you are sending audio to the server. Now, in the middle here, you've got some maps. These are public Ninjam servers. So these are people out there in the world connecting to public servers, and they're all playing together. Now, I'm going to hit listen on this, and let's see what some of these people are doing. Sorry, guys. Hopefully, you're on a public server, so you're expecting people to listen to you. You didn't know you were going to end up for a couple of seconds in a live stream today, but let's see how this works. It's buffering. And now we've got a couple guys playing drums, organ, bass. I hear a horn in there. That's kind of smooth, actually. And everybody in this server is following a BPM. Everybody has to agree to set their clocks to the same BPM and what's called a beats per interval. We'll talk about beats per interval in a second. All right. So that gives you an idea of what people are usually using this setup for, right? They're using their Jamtaba or their Reaper or whatever other client they have to connect to the Ninjam server, and they play their instruments together like a band, and they're all in this virtual space together, and they're synchronized by this clock on the server. All right. So let's go back and see if my session is set up yet. It is not. It's taking its time. I realized that today this would be a little bit of a tightrope walk. You know, this is a technical thing, and sometimes it works really well, and sometimes it doesn't. Let's see. I'm going to refresh. It's still setting up. Let's talk to. How you doing, Sultane? What's up?
I'm doing great.
Good.
I opened my Ableton. I'm ready to input the server address.
Okay, so you're ready. I see now on my other screen that my Koord server has gotten started.
Nice.
Let's check in with the chat a little bit, see how everybody's doing. Thomas D'Amico from New York City, welcome. Ekaterina, what's up? Let's see, looking for some questions. Enigmatic Onion, I think it was you that recommended Welch's Synthesizer Cookbook. You got it? Oh, great. Yeah, that's a good one. I like that book, so glad you got that. And Seth is mentioning about Store's last performance online using Ninjam was with Lady Starlight and Rodhead. I listened to that. There was some really good stuff in there. Definitely, you guys should go check that out. And a reminder to everybody, if you want to get in for the giveaway this week, this is your last chance to sign up. For the giveaway, we'll be announcing the winner of the Arturia Effects bundle at the end of the show. And let's get into the setup here. So back to... All right, you can see now my Koord session is live. So there's now a server running with an instance of Ninjam. I don't know where it is, remotely somewhere, right? And I've got a session IP. So what I want to do is then copy the session IP address, go back into Ninjam running in live, and there's a menu on the top. I'm going to click on Ninjam, and I want to connect to a private server. So instead of one of these public servers, I could right now go and join and start playing some weird techno with these jazz guys. They probably wouldn't like that very much. There's definitely with these public servers some opportunities to mess with people. I don't know. Let's all be nice about that. If you're going to experiment with this and join some public servers, you know, maybe don't like play like crazy noise on top of whatever their like kind of psychedelic jam they're doing. Not trying to give you any ideas. Anyway, let's go to Ninjam, connect with private server. And right here in the server field, I'm just going to copy in that address that I got from Koord. The port number, you shouldn't have to change that. That should be you can leave that alone. You can put in whatever username you want. I don't believe there's a password necessary for these Koord servers. Click OK. And right away, you're going to hear a click. So that metronome, that click, is coming from the server. And that's the click that we're going to sync to. Now, this isn't an automatic thing using MIDI. I'm not going to press a button and it's automatically in sync. I have to match my DAW tempo to whatever the Ninjam server is doing. Now, what you just saw the BPM get faster. And what happened there is Sultane joined the server at the same time, and he changed his BPM, and it voted and set the server tempo. So now he's got his instance of Jamtaba and Ableton Live set to 130, and now my client is following along. You're getting ahead of me. Let's get the setup first before we start jamming. So there's something called a beats per interval, and that's the number of beats that you count before it starts over. And this isn't going to determine how in sync you are. This is going to determine musical phrases. This is one of the things that live players will use. We'll say, okay, we're going to do this arrangement, and every 16 bars, there's going to be a change. And so you would set your interval so that everybody knows when the change is going to happen. Because there's a delay here. What's happening, let's turn that metronome off for a second, is instead of trying to reduce the latency and give you an instant signal so that everybody hears each other at exactly the same time that you actually play, it's increasing the latency and adjusting it to fit the clock. So it's not trying to, a lot of online collaboration and audio, collaboration is trying to do low latency audio. This is actually doing the opposite. It's increasing the time that it takes for the audio to be transmitted, but it's making it match a certain BPM. And then, so everyone's always going to be behind each other by 1 bar, 2 bars, 4 bars, depending on the overall latency and what the interval is set to. All right, so let's put that metronome back on. The beats per interval is 8, so that's 2 bars of 4/4, and the BPM's 130. There's a sync with live button here, which I am not going to use, actually. What this will do is stop the server clock and then restart in sync with live when I start live's transport. That will work in the beginning, and one person can sync with their DAW and then make the server match what they're doing. In this case, I'm going to leave the server going, and I'm going to try to do what a DJ does, an old school DJ who doesn't have automatic beat matching, and start my beat exactly on the first beat of the interval and try to get that lined up as best as I can. All right. So I'm going to put my metronome on. I think you guys should hear this. I've got my live BPM at 130, and I'm just going to make sure I'm on the first beat. And as soon as I hear one come around, try to start as close to the beat as I can. And you can hear they're a little bit off. Now, this is one of the benefits of using live. Live has a nudge. So you can get the beat close, but you don't have to stop, start to get it on. I can just slow it down a little bit or increase it a little bit until it lines up correctly. So I just pulled it back a little bit, and you can hear now that my metronome and the Jamtaba Ninjam metronome are almost perfectly on. And as soon as those things are on, assuming you've got a good stable internet connection, it should stay on for a really long time. You shouldn't have to readjust this too much. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my metronome off and mute the Ninjam metronome. And then if I just start playing a beat, I can trigger clips in live, and these will be exactly in time with the Ninjam server. Now, your turn, Sultane. Sultane's on the same clock, on the same server, and he's going to get his beat started and in sync with what I'm doing. It might be easier for him. I'm actually going to turn my metronome on. Do you hear my metronome, Sultane?
I turn it off. I don't think I can hear it now.
Oh, okay. It sounds like you're pretty much on time, right?
Yeah.
Put your kick drum on. Let's hear if your kick drum's right on time with my metronome. Pretty close.
Yeah. Slower a little bit. I can't hear your metronome.
That's fine.
To delay.
You're a little bit ahead, I think. Why don't you try and nudge it and?
Yep. Okay. How's this? A little bit better.
Still a little bit late. But it's pretty close.
Nudging it on my controller, by the way, guys. It's like,
oh, that's
you can.
That's on now. Now, I just want to point out to everybody that what I hear from him is a few bars, or we counted this. There was something like maybe 15 seconds or so, depending on your BPM, where he'll make a change and then I will hear it a little while later. So there's still a lag. There's still a latency here. It's not instant. The point is, though, that even if there is latency, if there is lag between what he hears and what I hear, it's still in sync because we're following that clock on the server.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're on now, and we can just start playing. And the audio you're hearing from Sultane is coming through inside of the Jamtaba plugin. So you can see here, there's another set of tracks that are horizontal. You can actually change what those look like. I'm seeing his input level, his name. If I wanted to, I could solo just his part and then bring myself back in. I could mute him. You know, sometimes if you're in a public server and someone's playing something that you don't like, you can just mute them and you don't have to listen to them. They can still hear themselves, but you can lower or remove a part if you find it interrupting what you want to be doing. Now, we have a question here about the lag. Tuseth asks, doing that your gear lag a bit and have to constantly nudge. How often you have to nudge really, I think, depends on your internet connection quality. It also might depend on your hardware setup and what your computer is doing. For example, we found when we were testing this over the week that sometimes Sotne, he would add in a plugin in live and it would drop everything out of time. So I think it depends on how your DAW handles plugin delay compensation. It's possible to interrupt the sync by making changes to your setup. So it probably makes sense in terms of workflow to have your tracks and your effects and your instruments set up beforehand and not be loading and unloading things while you're playing. That said, using Live, I've been able to add instruments and add plugins and make changes to my setup and still keep the sync. Actually, let's try that.
I think, John, it's I noticed that this happens with third-party plugins mostly.
Yeah.
Like if I added like Jupiter or something or some effect, but not with the stock presets and racks.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. You were adding in some like Roland Cloud plugins, and those are pretty heavy memory and CPU intensive things. And those were definitely, when you added one of those in while we were playing, it knocked the sync out. But I can go in and like add a plugin to, I don't know. Let's see what I got. I have these kind of chill filtered pads going on. No, you know, if I just want to drop a delay on that.
Oh, nice. That sounds nice.
It's still, you know, it's still in sync. I didn't knock the clock out. And let's check that. So I can, if anytime you're not sure you're on, you can open up your plugin, unmute the metronome. I'm still on, pretty close anyway. This sounds good. Getting deep today.
Yeah.
I guess we're jamming now.
Yep.
I'm just turning Sultana up a little bit. The bass line sounds kind of nice. It was in the background, so I'm bringing them up. So right now, I'm the one that's streaming, so the final mix is controlled by what I'm doing.
Does it have a Jupiter? A little bit of a hand delay that you like, John?
We can't hear you when the music's going. I got to turn the beats down so I can hear what you're saying.
I can put. Oh no, I was just saying the pan delay that you like.
Say again?
The pan delay on Jupiter.
Oh, okay.
That you liked.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Nothing. Yeah.
Move your mic up a little bit because it's falling down a little bit. I'm not really hearing you.
Is this better?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good.
Sultany's up in his stream game. He just got a new mic. We're still getting that sorted out.
Yeah. I'm learning a lot about microphones in general. And microphone stand.
let's bring it down and we'll chill out and talk a little bit about what we've been doing and just hang out with the chat.
Nice.
So Martin Crockett says get some track spacer on the voice. What voice? You talking about just me, my voiceover for the, or I mean I've got some, I mean that's something you all right, let me turn that. I got the 808 sync, the RD8 actually, so it's synced up over here and it just goes and goes and goes. There's no clip for it. But you know, when you're, that's something to talk about. Like when you're live jamming with techno, like how techno sounds, like your mix and your sound design is really important, right? Your effects processing is as much a part of how good the groove is as, you know, whether you're in sync and what your melody is or your bass line or whatever. So that is something to think about, like how do you mix your stuff for a live jam? I mean, that might be a topic for another day in depth, but if I were to go and suddenly drop in a track spacer while we were doing this, everything would go out of sync on my end. Track spacer is a heavy duty thing. It's taking up a lot of resources. So that's what we were saying earlier about you got to be careful with your third-party plugins, and you want to usually make sure that you've got everything loaded up that you're going to use, because if you're bringing plugins in and out in real time, it quite possibly may knock you out of sync. Actually, speaking of sync, we've been jamming for a little bit. Let's see if I'm still on the clock. Yep, hasn't drifted. I mean, we've got a really tight connection. We're able to, I haven't had to nudge since we initially got it on. You know, and that's how you're able to do this for like an hour, 2 hours without falling out of time. Martin Crockett says no diva. Well, no, use the diva. Just don't bring it in while you're playing. Load it up first. Make sure your DAW is set up with the instruments that you want to play and the effects that you want to use. Dude, it's distracting. I love it. He's making all these trippy noises and I'm trying to talk. So yeah, you can totally use CPU intensive plugins. Just make sure you don't like bring them in or out of your session while you're performing, because it's going to knock your sync off. So, and it is really solid. And I want to point this out. I've been trying to keep it right in time with the clock from the server, but there's a little secret here. And that is, as long as the BPM is the same, like if I'm at 130 and the server's at 130 and I can't. Apologies, you have a tricky name. As long as everybody's at exactly the same BPM and like and your computer or your hardware has good timing, even if you fall off the server clock, if you're still in sync with each other at that interval, it will still be synced. So if I hear him drifting, I can use nudge to go back in time with him. We'll both be off the server clock, but we'll be in sync with each other. And because the interval and the BPM are correct, we'll still be in sync. So, and that's really important, because that if you're using hardware, that makes a big difference, because hardware tends to float a little bit more than the computer does in terms of the BPM, how steady it is. So, yes, and also I have the psychedelic background here. Martin has pointed out that my video synth is actually not following the clock, but sometimes it sort of just looks like it fits, because that's how our minds work. We want to look for patterns where there are none. So we could change that a little bit. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about, we want to talk a little bit about hardware syncing, because I do have this RD8 hooked up, and we can talk a little bit about how that works. I don't have other hardware. I tried to get a couple people to join us today that use hardware, and I wanted to get an idea on their end of how it worked syncing. For those of you that are more DAW-less, all right, you still have to use a computer to do this. There's no standalone hardware yet that will connect to an Ninjam server. It'd be great if someone like built a little Raspberry Pi device that you could put in your Euro rack that would connect to the server and provide a clock to your modular system. That's an idea for some enterprising manufacturer out there, I think. But So you're still, at this point, you have to use a computer to provide your clock for your external gear. And then you got to think about latency between the computer and the hardware clock and how precise that clock is. And being able to nudge is a really big deal. I know that I remember in one of the discussions that Speedy J had, and they have their knob twiddlers streams where they get together and discuss music production and stuff with different artists. And I think he mentioned that he likes using the Electron sequencers that have a nudge. So I think like the Octatrack, the Digitact, things like that, they also have this nudge function where you can set like a BPM and then speed up momentarily to go in or out of sync with the clock. And I think that would be really helpful. Like, so if one of you wants to try this, and you're going to get your clock from Reaper or from the standalone Jamtaba or from your DAW running the plugin, and you can have your hardware synced up to the DAW, and if it goes in or out of time, you can, using the Electron stuff, you can nudge it like I was using in live. In my case, I don't have any Electron stuff hooked up. But since I have live, any nudging I do in live will be applied to the MIDI clock going out into my drum machine or whatever else is hooked up in terms of hardware. We'll get into this again in a minute. Let's also just talk a little bit again about what we're doing here. This is, of course, 343 TV. I am John Selway. This is the chat. How's it going, chat? Nice to have you here. Hopefully you guys are enjoying our experimenting and diving into this online jamming, syncing thing with Ninjam and Jamtaba. And 343 Labs, of course, is a school. I teach for the school. I do synthesis and sound design and Ableton Live instruction. We've got online courses and courses in person, especially in Berlin. We've got a nice location at the Riverside Studios in Berlin, which I hope to see one day. And if you're interested in knowing more, do check us out. We have the links down below in the description. We have a Discord server that we want to kind of get going and get more people involved in. That community is growing rapidly. Definitely come and check us out there. We have a giveaway this week. If you haven't entered already, if it's not too late, there should be a link here in the chat somewhere to win an effects bundle from Arturia. We'll be announcing this shortly. And that's my spiel. Let's say hi to the chat. Someone is asking, Cool Vape says, are you the Selway who did Disintegrator on Lenny D's label? Yes, that is me. Oliver Chesler, otherwise known as the Horrorist, and myself used to do, back in the very early 90s, Disintegrator and Koenig cylinders, and we did our releases on Industrial Strength and IST, that side label, Industrial Strength Trance, although it never really was trance. But thanks for asking. That's sort of my beginning in the world of techno in the very early 90s. Trovarsi mentions there is a device by Happy Circuit that has Wi-Fi. I'm not sure. Is that Happy Circuit thing, is that using Ableton Link? Sotny and I were talking about that earlier, whether, Ableton has its link technology, which allows applications to automatically sync over a network. I wonder if there's a way to enable that over the internet, or if that's something they're working on developing. I would think someone's thought about trying that. And what is this? Yudhishthir, great name. I'm sure I pronounced it wrong, but he's saying, I have been mulling over this real-time jamming for some time now. Superb insights. I'm going to try it. I definitely think you guys should try it, especially now that, all right, I showed you before, where is that? The Koord website where you can have a virtual server for free. I don't know. They're in beta. This is a brand new thing. I don't know if this is going to remain free or how this is going to work. But in addition to being able to use Koord to start a server, or joining an existing public server through Jamtaba, you can also start a private server on your local machine. So this is a fast way of getting started. Depending on whether if Koord keeps the service available for free, definitely that's the way to start, because you can have this server, the Ninjam server, running on a fast machine in the cloud, and it's not going to take any resources away from your personal computer. But if for some reason that's not available, or if you just want to try this out, Jamtaba allows you to host a private Ninjam server on your machine. You can actually do this separately with the Ninjam software as well, but it takes more configuration. The Jamtaba version automates the process of setting up the server on your machine, and it makes it much easier to get going. So I could actually start a server here and then give that IP to my friends and have them join and do. It's more peer-to-peer. It's not going through a hub on the cloud. It's going to go in straight to your machine. And that might be another way for you to try it out. So I just wanted to point that out. That's pretty important. Two Seth says, my bro told me the horrorist Oliver was pretty nuts. We don't need to go into personal comments about Oliver Chesler, but he's been a friend of mine for a long time, and okay, he could be a little crazy, but I would say he's a great performer, and he's done a really good job at getting out there and playing his style of music and performing and being successful. So, and he and I still talk, and occasionally we make music together still. We did a remix a couple years ago. We need to get back and do some Disintegrator stuff or Koenig Cylinder stuff again. I think that would be a lot of fun to do, and maybe we'll do it using this. Maybe we can like jam out some ideas using a Ninjam server. And that's another good thing about Ninjam that we should talk about. Using Reaper it's a good idea for this workflow, but Ninjam gives you the capability of recording everything played through the server to separate audio files. So I can show you. I'm not going to do this now, but if you go into the preferences and choose Save Multitracks, from the moment you connect to the server, it will record audio, to whatever place on your hard drive that you want to record it. Probably good to use it on a separate, if you have an external drive that's not your system drive, that's not where all your plugins and samples are loading from, it'd probably be good to use an external drive. But this will let you save multitracks of everything that you played. And then you can go back. If you're using Reaper, it'll actually load it into the DAW and have it all laid out on the timeline for you. So that's a reason to use Reaper if you want to capture like a multi-track performance of the whole jam. It sort of automates the process. If you don't do it in Reaper, or you don't click Generate Reaper project file, it's just going to save WAV files or whatever on your hard drive, which you would then drag in onto the timeline in your DAW, and then you could go in and edit or sample or arrange. Maybe you want to like take parts of it and build a new track out of it. So that's another fun use of this. Also, I'll point out, and this is relevant when you're using the standalone version, Jamtaba hosts VST plugins only. Even if you're on a Mac, it doesn't recognize audio unit plugins, just VST. So if you're using the standalone version and you're just performing live or playing live, you can actually just load in your favorite plugins. You could even use external hardware to sequence the plugins and use this as just a VST host. There's a lot of stuff you can do with this. It's really flexible and powerful. All right, so that's that. Let's take a look at the hardware sync a little bit. So I just want to show you how I set up my, let's hit stop. So there's a couple different ways to do this. Initially, I just made an audio track in live, and I have the output of my RD8 plugged into an input on my audio interface, and I've got that selected there. External audio in 3. And I could turn that on, and it's already synced up right now. Let's go ahead and turn the metronome on, and I'll try to get this synced up again. Oh, a little early. So I'm going to pull it back. And now I've got my external RD8 in sync with the Ninjam clock. And that's pretty much going to stay tight. I'm using a USB MIDI connection. I haven't tried this with the regular MIDI DIN cable yet, but it should be about the same. And, once it gets on, it stays on. I haven't heard it really drift too much. And this is going to depend on your hardware. Some hardware is tighter than others. I'm going to say more modern MIDI gear is probably going to be a little tighter, and more old school MIDI gear may be a little looser. That's just a generalization. But if I were to hook up 30-year-old 909 or 808, it probably with a MIDI converter, because those 909s have MIDI, the 808 didn't. You have to convert MIDI to DIN sync. That's going to drift a little bit. There's a whole world of info out there about MIDI and DIN sync and how to handle latency with the computer. It's going to depend on your DAW. It's going to depend on what hardware you have and how it's hooked up. So it's going to add complexity to this setup. In this case, just using the USB straight into a modern drum machine with a tight clock, it's really easy. Now, the only thing I had to really adjust was there's a bit of a latency issue going into live, using live as a mixer. Right. So because I'm working in the DAW, I need my external gear to clock tightly with the DAW. And in order to do that with live, I had to go in and adjust the MIDI clock sync delay. And this is compensating for the amount of time it takes the audio signal to play through live. Right? It's not, because if I had the output of live going into a separate mixer and the output of the drum machine going into a separate mixer, I wouldn't need to do this. It's super tight without the delay compensation. But because of the way live handles the audio coming in real time when you're monitoring through live, it adds a delay. So I needed to adjust the MIDI clock to compensate for live's, delay that it's giving to the audio. So if I put this back to 0 and put that clock on again, you're going to hear it's going to be, well, actually, let's get it synced up without the external drum machine. I'm going to put on Live's internal metronome and try to get my metronome synced up with the Ninjam metronome. Oh, that was bad. Let's go again. All right, I got lucky. I clicked right perfectly, so it's right on top. Now let's listen to the RD8 and see if it's actually in sync. Nope. So the RD8 is late because of Live's audio latency. Even though I have a low buffer size in the audio preferences, there's still latency. For whatever, I'm not going to try to go into why or what reason that is. I just want it to work. So let's go back into the MIDI preferences, and I'm going to adjust my MIDI clock sync delay. It's actually negative and it's bringing it tight in with the metronome. So that's going to have to be, you're going to have to experiment with that on your side. Your hardware setup's going to be different than mine. Your gear is going to react differently to the MIDI, and your computer may handle audio latency coming back into your DAW differently. Right? So each of you, if you try this, you're going to have to experiment and figure out what you need to do to get your external gear tight with the Ninjam metronome. But once it's on, it stays on really tight, at least in my case. All right, let's get these metronomes off and keep jamming a little bit, I guess. So the way I have this set up, and this is because of the way I have it going into the stream, you can see I've got a glue compressor on the bus and a limiter, because we're jamming, levels can be all over the place. You definitely need to kind of sort of master it a little bit so you don't blow out and distort where you don't want to. And so that's treating the audio going into Jamtaba. Right, and then the audio's passing through Jamtaba to my main outs, but I've also got my my rack set up where I split the audio. Actually, I've got one, it's doubling it now. One's going into my headphones, and then the other one's going into the stream in OBS on another computer. And because the stream output is on a separate set of outputs, I can go in, preview samples, load up clips from my library, listen to material, and kind of preview it and figure out what I want to add to the jam before it's actually audible. So I'm going to try to add an element to this. But let's break this down a little bit so it's not totally overloaded. You know, and if I go, let's say I want to add another hi-hat to this. And I can do this because I know using live native devices and not third-party plugins that I can add tracks and devices without throwing the sync off, or at least it should. Let's see. Make a new MIDI track, drag that sample onto the MIDI track, puts it into a simpler, right? And have the track off so you can't hear it. I also have my preview off. And I'll just, let's drag in, copy and paste a simple hi-hat pattern. And then I'm able to add a new element in real time. And you can kind of write and improvise and create as you jam. So Live makes it really easy to do that. Now, I don't know how well that works in Logic or Cubase or whatever, or Reason. They're going to have a different workflow. But I know that Ableton Live is working really well for this workflow, being able to add elements in real time, assuming you're sticking with the native devices that are not throwing the sync off. I hear this is off a little bit. It's a little bit late. The RD8. But then I can go back in to the preferences. If I hear external gear on a particular output going off a little bit, I can adjust it here. That's one way. It's not nudging it, and it's a little dangerous. Oh, it sounds a little worse now. Anyway, so you can hear there's still a little bit of looseness going on in the groove there. But it's not totally off. Oh, is that your kick, Sotne?
Yeah, for a second, I think I'm off too.
So
it sounded fine.
It sounded fine though. Sometimes I want to point this out. Like, let's get rid of the 808 going incessantly, the RD8 going incessantly. I kind of like how it drifts a little bit. It's kind of like a really good DJ who knows how to beat match can do things with time and groove going in and out of sync just slightly that is actually can be really creative and unique. And, it's something as if you're thinking about DJing, if everything's perfectly synced all the time, you lose that subtlety that a person who's doing the fine beat matching by ear can do, right? So having it be slightly out of time a little bit sometimes, as long as you're not train wrecking and you have it under control, playing with time like that in milliseconds can actually do really cool things for your groove and how things fit together. Especially like if you're doing things like layering kick drums. I think people talk about when they're mixing kick and bass, how things can go in and out of phase. And if you're layering a bunch of kicks and you'll have low frequencies kind of changing how they sound depending on their phase. If you're playing live and I've got a kick drum and you've got a kick drum and we're perfectly in sync, we might be getting phase cancellation, but then if you let it drift a little bit, it changes the phase and you might get a new kind of cool sound combining them together. So you can actually play with that time in that how perfectly it is in sync and use that creatively if you're, kind of daring and you have control. So this has been a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed our kind of experimenting here and seeing how this works. And going back to the chat here, thanks, Martin. CHDB Music's lots of potential for real-time collaboration with this. That's the whole point here. And it's time to announce our winner of the Arturia Effects Bundle. Congratulations to Max Weinold. Congratulations. Make good use of that. And, if you're not sure what to do with it, you can come and, join us in the Discord, ask questions, check out our tutorials here on YouTube, our streams on YouTube that we do every day. And, we're here for you. So welcome to the community, and congratulations again on being our winner this week. And yeah, Seth mentions some drifting can be nice, adds a human feel. I agree. And then, when it's exciting, doing this in real time, like you're collaborating with someone, you're interacting, you're hearing each other, even though it's not instantaneous. For this kind of music, for repetitive, hypnotic, rhythmic music, it totally works that, if he does something and it's 2 bars, I hear it 2 bars later, it's still close enough that we can kind of react. It kind of lends itself to slow builds and sweeps up and down. It would be difficult to program like a perfect build and drop where like everybody comes back in on the same beat. You have to kind of think ahead. If you know that you're 2 bars apart, then you're going to have to bring your drop down 2 bars early so that everybody else hears it at the right time. So that part is tricky. I think that would come with practice, figuring out, how to handle that time shift. But if you're not worried about that type of orchestration where everybody turns on a dime and you're just letting it flow, I think it's really easy to get into this. And it's getting easier and easier. The technical setup now, with the fact that there's someone providing free Ninjam servers, they run for 2 hours and then they stop automatically. So you kind of have a time limit to work with, but you can restart another one after 2 hours. It's getting easier to do this reliably. The fact that you can do this privately with a server and you don't have to learn how to do that yourself. I actually am hoping that we, for 343 Lab, can set up a 343 Lab Ninjam server for our students and, for us to be able to use. I think that this also is a good teaching tool. It's a way for us to connect with our students and for our students to connect with one another as well. So I'm hoping that we can set up something like this so that, you guys that are part of our 343 community can join in and, come to the Discord, get on the channel, say, hey, who wants to jam? And then we'll have a server there for you. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that we can set that up. We got to talk to the guys about getting that going. But in the meantime, you have, the public servers you can access. You've got the Koord beta, which is providing free Ninjam servers. And I think this was successful. What do you say, Teltney?
Yeah, it's pretty great. And I think that server thing is going to remain for free. And they're going to have like a free tier that expires in 2 hours. And they're just going to add
that makes sense.
Unlimited ones. So
no, that's right. If you want, if you want it for a whole day, then you pay for it. That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to become paid. So I wouldn't worry about that either.
That's great. So thanks very much, you guys, for hanging out with us again. This has been a real kick. Definitely, as always, doing my live stream every week is a highlight. So thanks for coming along. Thanks again to Teltney for helping me out here. Come back on Monday for Dull Trick, and I'll see you next week. Adios, guys.